what are things that I wish my father would have taught me? But this is applicable for parents or actually any caregiver for children. And so whether it be a father, mother, grandparents, grandfather, grandmother, nan, auntie, but basically those that are taking care of children. So this is really what that's who the video is for, as those that are raising children or are involved in their children's life. So I think this video is for you. So if you're interested, and we'll talk about how do we develop that? How do we teach that in children and really with each other as well, and what are the strategies? Because I welcome back, folks. This is Kenton here with Kenton and Abiba. So Abiba has this great idea about asking what are the things that you wish your father had taught you. As some of you may not know, my father passed away when I was very young. I was about 10 years old. My brothers, I was the oldest, so my brothers were much younger. I think my youngest brother was about 5 or 6 at the time. So we lost him at a very young age. And so a lot of things that we've had to learn on our own. And so as you get older and you're raising children, so what are some of the things that you wish you could have learned? And some things, though, are also just product of time. This is the first of a series of things that I would wish that my father had taught me. But today's topic is just how I wish in teaching basically emotional intelligence and empathy. Many times we just assume that's something that's just going to be learned or acquired over a lifetime. Basically through experience, and then you'll get it when you get it, that kind of thing. And this thing, emotional intelligence, is actually something that was coined in 1990. So my father passed away in 1979, so long before even that concept was even prevalent. And actually in 1995 is when it came out into a popular psychology book by Dr. Coleman. So it was way before his time, so he wouldn't have been able to really have taught it. But nonetheless, we have the luxury of that type of information. So one of the things is that how do we teach that in our children knowledge? But I think that when you have traumatic events or experiences at a young age, sometimes it can, you need this help to process it, and also how to be able to work through grief and understanding. And I think sometimes and growing up in that type of scarcity environment, I think it created some challenges in regards to self-regulation. I had a lot of tremendous anxiety as a young person. I was very, very introverted, even though I may make outward appearances not to be, but I was inside. I was very very withdrawn in regards to that. I would probably say I was, I guess for lack of a better word, sad. So it's that type of self-regulation and understanding those type of things. And I think sometimes I acted out in frustration and anger if I had better self-regulation and empathy in regards to that. So I think there's just different things, but the challenge sometimes is that you can be overly hypercritical on yourself. Some of it is that I would get frustrated much quicker. I didn't really have anyone to talk to about my emotions, and so what happens is that I would shut down, versus working things out. I think it's like instead of having constructive ways of managing frustration and anger and stuff like that, I think that it would come out in unproductive or non-productive ways. And so I think that's why those experiences inform me to be a better parent, better father. I think by being always present and trying to model those things intentionally. Teaching emotional intelligence, a lot of it is us modeling. When we look at our parents or we look at our adults that we look up to, many times it's just how they behave. It's not about just what they say, it's about what they do. And those are things that we remember. So the thing is understanding emotional intelligence and empathy. So how do we do that? So One is, how do we create self-awareness in a child? How do they self-regulate their emotions, specifically in times of challenges? Also, how to develop those type of social skills in building relationships and navigating conflict. That's a big one, and I think that's relevant today. And then understanding others' emotions, particularly during times of conflict, and how to create supportive interactions. So again, how do we create those things? So of course, one is by leading by example, as I said, by modeling, demonstrating that, and particularly if you're in a relationship, is the children are very attuned to emotions and to basically the temperature of the room, and so they look to see how partners, spouses, partners in caregiver roles, how they interact with each other, and that also includes in-laws and extended family and so forth. So those things are very critical in developing that type of empathy. So how you acknowledge and express your emotions with your partners. Now, if you're a single parent, again, then it's also how you interact also with extended family or with siblings and so forth. So all these things create these forms of ways to behave and in a productive way that fosters and supports relationship. My father is of that generation where after a long day of work, he would come home and, basically he would sit in his favorite couch and, we were told they'd leave Dad alone. And it was that kind of thing. He just said hello, and then, he went about his business, and then every once in a while he would interact with us. So I think that's just a different time. I think now we know that as engaged, intentional parents, that being engaged, but sometimes you have a hard day at work, so you want to come home. And that's where, again, the modeling comes in, is where you just express to your child or your children that, hey, it's a tough day, just give me a moment and let me catch my breath, and then and I want to hear about your day. So here you're sharing your needs. See, that's basically the psychological. You're sharing your needs, but at the same time, you are saying that their needs are also acknowledged, and that you are basically, once you are able to meet your basic needs at that time, you can then go ahead and meet their needs. So it's not denying, saying, I don't want to talk to you, but basically I do want to talk to you, I just need a moment. And this also allows the child to also see how basically to understand, and that creates also empathy, the needs of others, as well as that acknowledging that their needs also are important as well. And it also avoids what is the typical withdrawing. Oh, well, you're too busy for me, and so forth. So yeah, I think too is that's just talking about feelings again when it's age appropriate, but acknowledging that feelings are there. You don't necessarily have to dwell in those feelings, but you acknowledge them, and then you find ways how to negotiate and manage those feelings. It's okay to get mad, but it's not productive to be mad all the time. So you're acknowledging it, but you're not dwelling on it. And then you say, hey, what do you think we can do? Do you think it's a good idea? Let's go play some ball, or let's go for a walk, and let's work it out. So that way you can find a way to transfer that anger into a productive behavior, and then allow that space to basically solve those type of problems. But that's where I think what's different in our generation and generations subsequently is the emotional coaching. Now it's more about emotional coaching and sharing your experiences with your child, and saying that it's okay to feel that way, but and then let's talk about ways that we can make it better and find solutions or ways to manage it. I think one of the critical things is also routine is very important. So daily check-ins are important, and this is good just even for marriages too and other relationships. But just to check in, doesn't mean daily, meaning it has to be scheduled. But when you're with each other, just check in. How you doing? What's going on? I think one of the things that I always I love doing when the kids were little is I took them everywhere, in the sense of I drove them to school, I picked them up from school. And it's one of those things because that's when I checked in. How was your day? What's going on? How's your friends? It's stuff like that. I took them, because people were working all the time as a practicing physician. So I would take breaks from the medical office because I helped manage it with her. So that gave us that ability to, I would go and take them to soccer practice or wrestling and stuff like that. And it allowed me to, again, check in and so forth. So those things are important. Sometimes it's hard because, if you're, again, juggling multiple jobs and stuff. So that's where mealtime comes in, check-in comes in at those meal times. But it's very important to check in. It creates that type of that reliability, and it creates that trust factor as well. So it's very, very important. So it's good as storytelling. One thing is that we're genetically and been endowed or created, depending on your perspective, or evolutionary, to be storytellers. We tell stories in our heads all the time, and as with young children, storytelling is a powerful tool to walk through developing empathy and stuff, and creating that type of understanding of the world and of others. So that's where fables come in. If you notice a lot of these older fables, or the Bible, all these type of stories, they have in their essence there is about the human experience, the human struggle, and then when you tell these stories, then you have a little discussion with your child. Some of you might remember having these things where you just curled up with your mom or your dad, and you have a story read to you, and then that story is talking about how would you do it? Would you do the same thing as David, in this situation? But also role playing is also cool too. Many times role playing also helps to work through these type of stories, or creating scenarios of challenges, like at school. What would you do? My son Kareem, he still does that stuff, but he more does it to harass me. But like, what would you rather do? This or that type of stuff. But it's those type of role playing and scenario playing that not only unleashes a level of creativity, but also a way to think through a problem. It's kind of like mental gymnastics. It helps to think about those things. So then when reality happens, when those situations do come up, that your child is better prepared and primed in thinking through those situations versus being reactive. Coping strategies. Coping strategies is very critical, especially in these times now. We have so much anxiety in regards to stressors, and then imagine also as a child going through not just school and social issues, but you also have external information through social media, through the news. So it can create a lot of concerns. There's also unpredictability in regards to school violence. I mean, we grew up in a time where, I grew up in California, so it had earthquake drills, but there were natural disasters. Now, we have to practice lockdowns even at the university. And so, you're dealing with things that 20, 30 years ago was not fathomable, but now it's seen as a daily occurrence, or as something that can happen and does happen across this country. The thing is then how do you then basically cope with these things, and how do you teach that? So this is where, again, is finding and looking for ways to help to self-regulate. So breathing exercises, calming rituals, just like going for a walk, looking for different ways to help to release. And of course, the most important thing is also to be able to be comfortable in sharing one's feelings, and be able not even just talking, but also active listening too. And that, again, that's just where that's that practice that comes in. You're not comfortable because again, it's understandable. Like I said, I didn't grow up with any of this, so I had to learn this on the way. But luckily, one of the things was that I also had children later. So it's also a challenge is that if you have children when you're younger and you haven't had a chance to be able to develop these skills, but it's never too late to start now. So that's the other thing too. So don't if you're listening to this and then you want to, I think sometimes we give ourselves too much grief, too much hypercriticism, like, oh, I should have started and stuff. Don't give up. I mean, it's never too late when you don't do it. So take the time and just go ahead and do it now. And even with if your children are a little older, you can always start, as long as and if it's coming from a place of where you really want to connect and share, because we're all works in progress. Then start it now. Encourage compassionate responses in regards to ways. So even with people you disagree with, you can still be compassionate. You can still disagree and understand. Like, I'm sorry, I can't see your perspective, but or I understand where you're coming from, but I see things in a different light. But if we can see that we do have these differences, but I feel that we can move on and work around those things. I think that's a very, very critical skill, especially working in a diverse workplace or just navigating through relationships and so forth. So, because I think really we do our society and our children this favor if we just think that the only way to manage through life and through this diverse and wonderful world is to just be with people exactly like ourselves. We're always going to be disappointed, because quite frankly, even the ones you think are like you are not like you, because that's impossible. There's always going to be variations, and that's what we see in nature. That's with human character and human beings. So generally we have some similarities in some ways, but we also have various differences. It's just a question of how we manage those and with respect and so forth. And that goes to then conflict resolution. This is where, again, working through feelings, working things in a constructive way, not taking things so personal that it becomes just attacks, unless they truly are. But that's rare. It's really more being able to understand and negotiate through conflicts in a way to get a resolution, and not to attack people personally, but to talk about the issues or the problem that's in front of them. And it's also being able to feel confident to talk about how one feels, and to also listen to how someone else's feel in a non-judgmental way, but through understanding. And in order to do that, the best way is to engage in cooperative play. Family night. I mean, we would play games with our kids, Monopoly and stuff like that. It's those things that helps to, again, create those bonds. And so whether it be board games or physical games or just being outside, but it's important to have some cooperative play. Finally, the last thing too is just having a sense of gratitude and appreciation. I think, as we go through life as parents, we have so much that we try to juggle. So it's not even just meeting their physical needs, as well as finances, and then your own relationship challenges and career. Is now looking at emotional needs. So it's to practice gratitude, and there's different ways. There's not one way. Whether it be spiritually through prayer, or just having quiet time together, or just having at night bedtime we say, well, what are you thankful for today? How was your day? To instill that kind of gratitude. And it's also important, because I think that's one thing, and coming from just personal experience, when you grow up in challenging times, sometimes it creates sometimes a scarcity perspective, and then that creates anxiety, but in an unhelpful way. I mean, anxiety is not necessarily a bad thing on its own. It's really how you manage it and have coping strategies to balance that out with productive behavior. But when you have too much of a scarcity perspective, it can be very limiting, because then what happens is that it's not that you look at the glass half full, but what happens is that you think that there's not enough, and then it becomes more fear, and then you're not able to find solutions or look at ways to basically break out of the challenge, because it creates some level of hopelessness that there's not enough resources, there's not enough to create possibility. So things then look impossible. Hopefully, the gratitude piece comes in, is that it creates that there's not about scarcity, that what we have is good, and that we can build upon that and develop a more hopeful perspective of things. So even when it's challenging, you know, just like you know, in sports and so forth, it's not over, right, until the bell rings. You want to promote that. So, and also, again, it's modeling. So if you also show that type of gratefulness, that type of appreciation for others, or and for yourself, then I think that you do your children a tremendous service. And then last but not least, in closing, I think too is that when you also practice acts of kindness, you involve the family in it too. So, you know, Thanksgiving's coming up, and there are still, you know, with these tough times, there are so many families that are struggling. So, you know, acts of service together, whether it be gathering donations for food, working in food pantries, finding ways to help others, whatever ways that you can find, big or small, to share and involve your children with. Well, thanks folks for listening. I really appreciate you and taking the time, and I hope you've got some things that will spark some discussions, as well as creative ways to develop emotional intelligence, empathy, and strategies for conflict resolution in your children and in your loved ones. If there is a subject or a topic that you would like us to talk more about, or delve deeper into, let us know. And because again, this is part of the community, it's part of sharing, and we get as much out of it as you do in regards to learning about all the different ways and thoughts about what's going on in the world. As part of this series, you know, there's going to be other topics in addition, just like financial literacy for children. It's going to be one of the topics. Another thing is just life skills. In basics, is tying a tie. Like I said, my father passed away when I was very little, so I didn't actually know how to tie a tie until I was in military school. And then my classmate had to show me how to tie a tie. So it's those little things that are actually important. They're very important in the development of a young person. So again, in this series, I think this is going to be about 8 or 9 part series. So on various different topics. Thank you so much, and in joining us and in watching, and hope you have a pleasant and blessed day.